few questions for you that I thought we'd get started with before we go into our deep dive PowerPoint. So let me ask you this question. It's sort of a double-edged question. Did you always want to be an artist? And do you think of yourself as an artist or a craftsperson?
Well, thank you, Shelley, for having me on the show. And those are good questions. I did not think I would always be an artist. Like many kids, when they're growing up, I was not very proficient at realistic rendering. And that's kind of the ruler that people are measured on when they're younger. And also, the profession of an artist is not necessarily always financially lucrative. So that wasn't what I was thinking. So I went into college as a business major. And even though I grew up my whole life crafting, sewing, baking, doing all of those things all the time, I thought I was going to go into business. And turns out that was not my passion. And I spent all my time at a place called the EMU Craft Center taking craft classes. And I fell into metals, took a class with a friend, and I got hooked. Next thing I knew, I spent all my time in there, and slowly my business major became a double major in art. So no, I didn't always think I was going to be an artist. As far as being a craftsman or an artist, I'm both. I draw from the very rich history of the field of art, jewelry, and metalsmithing, which is a craft tradition. But at the same time, I'm also not necessarily in all of my Judaica, but in most of the rest of my work, I'm always trying to push boundaries. And I'm wanting to pose questions with my work and create dialogue through the content that I'm exploring. So I consider myself both.
That's a great answer. And it's a great way to envision yourself in terms of doing both. Of course, you teach, so you're an expert in your field, as I listed off in your biography. But let me talk to you a bit about your Judaica and what your thoughts are on Hidur Mitzvah, the concept of beautification of the mitzvah. Do you think that the mitzvah has more resonance when you're using a more beautiful object?
That's a really interesting question, and it's not one that that is in the forefront of my creating. And while I have a very deep respect for Judaism and our rituals and traditions, what draws me to making Judaica is my not so much a religious interest, but my interest in the vast visual cultural history of the artifacts of our tradition. And because of Hidur Mitzvah, there is a huge, vast amount of cultural artifacts out there that I find fascinating, that I love to research. I'm really an academic. I love to research. And that's what really excites me. The thing that I tell my students is that I'm really interested in the power of objects as artifacts, and how objects can hold power, tell stories, create dialogue, and act as symbols. And so if somebody uses one of my objects in an act of Hidur Mitzvah, and it because of the connection that they have to that object, it makes them feel like, they're creating a more beautiful act, then that's wonderful. And I think the object is successful. But it isn't one that drives my artwork.
Okay, but I do feel that it's got to be close to the truth that in using one of your objects, the idea of kavanah, the idea of intent, would be enhanced. And I know that because of I actually meant to mention earlier, because I guess I was too worried about Idaho and Ohio, but I meant to mention, no, it's not your fault. I meant to mention that when I think of your work, I think of the combination of a deep, thoughtful approach, as well as highly executed and highly precision made objects, that you are able to combine the two, that you are in fact a researcher, and you are led to create inspiring pieces that broaden the horizon of the user. And I know that we're going to see this in looking at your work, that you introduce elements of whimsy and of fanciful elements into your work that draws the user or the viewer closer to the intent. So I'm going to say, yes, if one was using one of your objects, I think the kavanah would be richer and deeper. That's my comment for you.
I would hope so.
So let's have a look at some of your work. Let's go to the PowerPoint. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Good, perfect. Okay. So we're going to start with a little bit of history. So tell us a bit about your background and who are we looking at here?
We're looking at my parents and my grandparents and a very old picture of me. Both of my parents were born in Europe during the war, and they both had a lot of trials during their very early ages. My mother was born in occupied Holland to a Swedish mother and a Dutch father. And my father was born in Finland to a Danish mother and a Finnish father. And they both made it out of the war. My father's parents, they spent most of the war after he was born in Sweden as political refugees, and then moved back to Finland. And then my parents met later on in Belgium when they were going to med school. So I'm a first generation American, and we spent a lot of time whenever we could to go visit family in Europe. And so I have a lot of fond memories. I never did visit Finland, but all the other places where my family were.
What was Judaica like, or Jewish practice like in your home? Like, where do you come from? What is your story, origin story with regards to Judaism?
Well, my father was raised in a very conservative family, and I think when early on was probably Orthodox, because that was all that was there in Finland. And when I grew up, my family, I guess, initially did Shabbat dinners on Fridays and whatnot, but slowly they stopped doing that regularly, and I was really the only. I loved Hebrew school, and my brother and I both had a b'nai mitzvot. My sister did not; she chose not to. So we became very assimilated. So, but I was very much drawn towards Judaism. I loved the singing of our cantor, Rabbi Yitzhak Husband Hanker, and it was just so beautiful. And I love my friends. I have a great group of friends that I grew up with, and they're still my closest friends. And I married one of them, the rabbi's son. So we had, like I think the Hanukkah menorah we lit at home was one that my dad found at a garage sale. We did have, and I did inherit my grandmother's Shabbat candlesticks, but there wasn't a lot of Judaica necessarily around the house. There was a lot of art, but.
So here we have you as a little bit of an older, not a child, and this is a bit of you and your interest, where you've turned your interest to art.
Yes, that's from the EMU Craft Center, where I took those non-credit classes while I was starting out as a business major. And then I took that first metals class from Marcia McDonald, who is there. That's a later picture when she came to Boise and gave a workshop for me. And that's kind of where I fell in love with metalsmithing.
This begins your journey as a Judaica artist, would you say?
Yeah, when I was in undergrad, my boyfriend at the time, his father, Rabbi Myron Kimberg, passed away, died suddenly of a heart attack, and his passing had a profound effect on us. And that's when I started making Judaica. This amulet is the first piece of Judaica that I ever made. I made it for my boyfriend. He received an Aramaic amulet that someone gave to him while he was in mourning. And so I constructed this amulet after Psalm 23 with that same idea in mind. and the sum is stamped on the backside, which you can't see, but
It's very beautiful. Does that boyfriend still have this?
yes, it's by his bedside. Yeah.
That boyfriend is the man you married?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'm
My high
leading to
school
it.
sweetheart. Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. So this piece is very significant because, as I know, because it was one of your first major pieces, was it not, in your Judaica journey?
Yeah, at the time I was still weaving metal sculptures, and then I was making other Judaica, and this was one of the real first big pieces that I made. It's about 2 feet long. It is a Hadas, which is a spice box, and the spices are smelled during Havdalah, which is at the end of Shabbat, of the Sabbath. And I did a lot of research in order to create this piece. And I was trying to find the origin of this ritual. And the earliest noting that I could find of it was the Kabbalist tradition of smelling a twig of myrtle branch from the myrtle shrubs that grew in the Mediterranean. So this is a 2 foot long enlarged botanical nature study of a myrtle bush in its different stages of flowering. And then the pod at the bottom can be removed and passed around, and that's where the spices are held.
I'm
And so
showing
this
this, yeah, because I'm fascinated by Anika's devotion to research, and I wanted people to see how deeply she studies her references.
And this was actually, I wrote a whole little research paper on Hadas that accompanied this project. And it took me about, I don't know, 8 or 9 months to make. It was my big BFA project, kind of considered it a journeyman project. It's what my final big piece before I graduated. I know a lot of my students also have this desire to make one big piece when they graduate from undergrad. And I always try to get them to do maybe a smaller series of pieces. But I went for the one big one. So.
And here we have a turning point in your life. And this is your childhood sweetheart.
That's my childhood sweetheart, Oni. We were going to move to Madison, Wisconsin, and we decided to get married before we left so we could have a big party and invite all of our friends and share in our love. And so we got married, and we traveled for 6 months before we got married we traveled all over to visit family in Europe and Morocco and Israel. His mother's from Morocco. And then we came back and got married and moved to Wisconsin.
And this is leading us into a conversation about really the beginnings of your Judaic production or work. Tell us about what this is, and the scale is hard to understand. Tell us a bit about that.
Okay, so these are mezuzot, and they're only 4-5 inches tall. The one on the left is with the wood is 7 inches tall, and the one on the left is the first piece of Judaica I made in grad school. And mezuzot are scrolls that you put on the doorposts of your home. They're a bit like an amulet, and they're also a reminder of that there is one God, and so that they are the oldest Jewish ritual object because they are mentioned in Deuteronomy, so they have a biblical origin. And so the scroll in the inside is the mezuzah, and then there's the mezuzah case. And
so I was going to ask you about the concept of them leaning, and how that fits into your vision of Jews in nomadic sense.
So traditionally, a lot of the mezuzahs you can find are referencing the architecture of the time and period where they're from. And so these were kind of have that same reference to a parapet or a leaning tower, but also that it can be very precarious. So that was the idea.
And very, very well conveyed there. Now we come to some of the things that I particularly love about your work, which is the combination of the detail, as you can see, the detail around the center here of these Shabbat candles, and then the in contrast to the flatter areas. And I'm really glad that you put this image here to see. Tell me about your attraction to do work based on this influence.
My personal spirituality is very tied to nature, and I have a deep interest and love for botany and nature studies and gardening. And so some of the Judaica I make is really an opportunity for me to do what I love to do, which is hammer and silversmithing and really detailed, focused analysis of plant structure and trying to bring that together into a functional object.
And I just love seeing this poppy here, and just to understand your frame of reference there and how you're almost it's in homage to the poppy, but done subtly. And these also have botanical references. Tell me about these.
These also have botanical references, but they're not a specific nature study. They're more of enjoyment of metalsmithing techniques. So these are a technique called sinking, and then I did chasing and repoussé, and I just really had a lot of fun hammering them and making them.
That must help you get out a lot of aggravation.
It's
I
not
hang a hammer or
smashing.
something.
It's very detailed and finessed hammering. It's done with a lot of different tools, and it really, I believe that artists are lucky to be able to get into a flow state where it's meditative. And so I don't think it's a lot of hammering to get aggression out. That's more the image you think of when you think of like a big blacksmith at the forge. Right. This is much more detailed meditative work.
I included this slide about the chasing and repoussé because you mentioned it, and I just wanted people to get a feel for what that process is. And I'm going to imagine that these pieces are they pressed into a mold? Is that what that is here, or what's the process briefly?
No, these are images of my demo that I teach my students, and the grayish greenish stuff is called pitch. And it is a mixture of tree sap and a binder, often like brick dust, and then a lubricant, sometimes like beeswax. And the people who make it, they have their special recipe at Northwest Pitchworks. And but it's mainly tree sap, and you heat it up and you place your object in it. And what happens is that it supports it as you're hammering. So only where you hammer moves. If you didn't have it in this pitch and you just did it on a piece of wood or in a sandbag, the entirety of the piece of metal would move. So this is kind of a support, and you take it in and out of this pitch bowl as you work it.
So now we're looking at, thank you for explaining that. Mm-hmm. And what it tells me is, in fact, that this work that you do is very process driven in a way. Like, you have to know what you're doing. It's not like a sketch that you can just pull off. It's a process that you have to go through step by step. Tell me what we're looking at here. It's a Kiddush cup, I believe.
This is a Kiddush cup. And for those that don't know, a Kiddush cup is used for blessing wine and for Shabbat and holidays and life cycle events. And this Kiddush cup started out as a flat sheet of metal. And in undergrad, I hammered it up into the form that it was. But it had some technical issues. And as an undergrad, I didn't understand how to fix it. And so it sat for probably 20 years. And then finally, I decided to cut out the middle section and do what's called scoring and folding to create this Star of David in the middle. And you can only see it when you look into it. And it's this is an homage to one of my professors, Fred Fenster. And he did a lot of work like that, where you could see the Star of David inside the cup. So that's Fred there, Fred and Eleanor. I got to work with them in grad school, along with Lisa Gralnick and Sonia Clark and Aristotle Georgiadis. They were wonderful mentors. I learned so much from all of them. The reason I went to Wisconsin was to work with Fred, because he was one of the few professors who taught in my field and made Judaica. And so that's why I went to Wisconsin.
And I think as we see some more of your work, we'll see references back to that kind of style. And here we have where you ended up and where you live now.
Yep. I graduated in 2003 and moved to Boise, Idaho, because I got a job teaching.
And that's a good reason to go there. So now we're looking at two kinds of metals on a Kiddush cup. Talk to me about your use of combination for color and texture.
This is bronze overlaid on top of silver. The calligraphy is the part of the prayer Ufros Aleinu Sukkot Shalom, spread over us wings of peace. Very appropriate for right now. And the calligraphy was done by my mother-in-law, who was a Moroccan Jew, and at the age of 16, a refugee to Israel. And she did really beautiful calligraphy and did the calligraphy for this. And I pierced it out of a sheet of bronze and made it around this cup.
Very beautiful. And now this is one of my favorite pieces of yours, actually, because it combines both the function so beautifully, but also it invites you to contemplate natural forms. And I can also see the influence of Fred Fenster in this, where in the decorative nature of the stem. Talk to me about this Kiddush cup and what inspired you for it.
When I had a hard time coming up with ideas in grad school, I would do what's called raising, which is the technique of taking that flat sheet and hammering it up into a goblet form. And so I have several of these goblet forms that are unfinished. And so over the years, I was like, okay, I need to finish this. What am I going to do with this? And I do a whole bunch of sketching and idea generation, brainstorming. And this is what came out of some of my brainstorming. I do love forging wire, which is the base with all the vines and the tendrils. And so, yes, it's definitely influenced by Fred. He's the one who taught me the true techniques of raising, and he used a lot of forged tapers in his work. So, yeah.
How tall is this, more or less, do you think?
This one is a little bit taller. It's 9.5 inches. So it's...
That's a good, this would maybe be a good Kos Eliyahu or something. It's a really a significant piece of sculpture, really. Now we're jumping here to the idea of the Torah Pointer and your use of mixed media here, the use of introducing another element that is not metal. Talk to us about, first of all, do you want to explain what a Torah Pointer is?
Sure. A Torah pointer, also known as a yod, which means hand, is used to follow along when you're reading in the Torah, because the Torah scrolls are so sacred that you're not supposed to touch them with your hands. Also, I think the oils of your fingers would damage the sheepskin and smudge the ink eventually. So you use a pointer to follow along. And the pointer traditionally maybe had a little hand on the end that pointed, but it could be any number of things. And regarding my use of non-metal materials, that's actually something that I have always done, especially in my non-Judaica work. I always start with a question and then consider the material that will best convey the content that I'm interested in exploring. So using these antique mother of pearl buttons to express this is in the honor of the matriarchs, to express my appreciation for all the matriarchs that came before us, and then their embroidery needles for the pointer. It seemed like the most fitting I guess, honoring of all the matriarchs that came before us, who did all the mending of the clothes and the keeping of the house together.
Very brilliant. And these are the mother of pearl. These are buttons.
Those are all buttons. I just drilled holes in the middle of them so I could thread a rod through them.
Very brilliant. And what we're going to see now is a companion piece to those.
These are Shabbat candlesticks. That you light 2 candles on Shabbat when it begins. And they also have the mother of pearl buttons. And this piece, along with the Kiddush cup that I made in the same series when my daughter was younger and I was working on these, she came into the studio and wanted to help me. So I had let her put all the buttons on the threaded rod. And she told me at that time, and she was quite a bit younger, okay, these are going to be mine for my bat mitzvah. And so she now has a beautiful set of candlesticks and a goblet that we used for her bat mitzvah that will be for her for the future. So just keeping on that tradition of honoring the matriarchs.
And what I wanted, and I think these are stunning, what I wanted to show was some of your process, because we're going to see this Kiddush cup in a minute. But I wanted people to see how thoroughly you research these and how much detail and thought that you put into this design. It's not something that you just kind of grabbed some stuff you had at your work table, but rather an idea that you had. And do you ever find in doing this sketching, so now I'll show the finished piece, but do you ever find that you've sketched it, but then when you go to make it, it's not, you have to make adjustments?
I suppose a little. Yeah.
So you find that you're pretty right on then with what you anticipate. You know the
Yeah. I mean, I might make some changes, but a lot of what I sketch out becomes what I create. But sometimes there's changes because that design didn't quite work out. But yeah, like this design. I actually have since, and I haven't rephotographed it because professional photographs are expensive, but I have since put on a silver base underneath all of the embroidered needles,
right.
because I wanted it to be more sturdy. So there's no silver base. It's all pierced out, so it's just kind of a shadow underneath it.
Right.
But so that, yeah, things do change a little for sure. And you could see, like in my initial drawing, I had a whole bunch of embroidery needles, and then I decided to have these kind of more pillars of needles, 3 of them holding up, so there's more negative space. So yeah, they're more beginnings.
These are stunning, this suite. I love the use of the pearl, the buttons. So keys, tell us about your interest and fascination with the idea of keys and the fabrication of keys.
So in graduate school, for my MA, I got both an MA and an MFA. My whole MA work, and I think it's in the next slide, is all keys that are they're not Judaica. They are wearable art jewelry. And I was interested in the power of the key, and the mystery of the key, the security of the key. Traditionally, keys are worn on the body to show power. And I thought they were really fascinating. And you can also see some of my botanical studies here as well. And then I tied them, the jewelry, I tied them to women and the history of women, because they were the holders of the key. And then in Judaica, I was thinking, okay, keys can, and we'll see later, I had some Torah pointers that I made that are keys to unlock some of the mysteries of the Torah. And then it made sense for keys to be mezuzot, because keys are on the mezuzot are on the doorposts of your home. They're meant to to not only remind you of your connection to God, but also to maybe be a bit of an amulet and create security. At least that's how I see some of their original origins. And so a key kind of made sense.
So here we're looking at some more of your mezuzot, and this reference here. What is this plant? And tell us about these mezuzot.
Those are ginkgo leaves, and the ginkgo plant, well, it doesn't have any real direct relationship with Judaism that I'm aware of. I've always been really fascinated by ginkgo trees. I did a project when I was an undergrad. I called it the apotheosis of the ginkgo, because ginkgo trees are the oldest plant species that has continued to live. So it used to live back in the time of the dinosaurs. And so I think they're really fascinating, and these are also very fun to make. A lot of hammering again and forming to make these beautiful little ginkgos.
And I think, again, what I'm loving about it is this detail work. And then you have it in contrast to the flat areas of metal, and it really enhances it, makes it shine. So now we're going to look at some interesting, unusual mezuzot that you've made. This one has an interesting backstory, but really, what was the idea here of creating these waves?
So this was a commission piece for a rabbi who was retiring. My husband's cousin contacted me to have me do this for her rabbi. And he loved fishing, and he had these fish pins. So they sent me these fish pins to incorporate into a mezuzah for him and a retirement gift. I wasn't really sure what to do with them. I think they're kind of fun and whimsical. But I do love stagecraft and stage scenes. And so I was thinking about how they do water on a stage, and how they move it up and down to make it look like the water is moving. And so that's what the waves were, was kind of this idea of a stage.
And it's very fun, and the use of the colors. But here's another one that uses color. This is an interesting story on this one.
When this one I titled Dad's Luck. And when my father passed away, he was a bit of a pack rat like I am. And there were these objects in his desk drawer of his home office. And we really didn't know what all of them were. Like, I have no idea why he had a guitar pick. I knew he was a superstitious man, so I got the horseshoe. I don't know anything about the marble. He did play a little bit of golf, but not very much. So the golf tee's there. He did always have coins that were his birth date, and then he would give us coins of our birth date from the year of our birth. And so that's in there. So these are all these objects that were in his drawer. And as I said before, I really do think some of the origin of the mezuzah is a lot like the Hamsa or the evil eye. It's a bit of an amulet to secure your home, at least its early origins, as well as to remind you of your covenant with God. And so this one was in honor of my dad, and it's on my back door.
And I'm gonna sort of zoom a little bit through some of these, because I want to be able to have time. But this one is a Chanukia that you made. And tell us, are these movable pieces on the bottom?
They were all intended to be movable, but they were a little tipsy, and I didn't want with fire for them to be tipsy. So I made the acrylic base, so they all had a home, and they're all slightly different heights. And the vellum behind them are supposed to be kind of like clouds, and it's the idea of looking through the clouds at the light.
And here's another beautiful. This Chanukia. This is one that is in the museum in New York. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. I entitled it Light in the Darkness. I have experimented with wood carving and glass casting, and this is hand-carved walnut with cast glass, and then little silver inserts for the candles. And it's that idea of perhaps burnt wood, but there's light. My mother has a saying in her house, the barn burned down, but now I can see the moon. It's kind of that idea. I don't remember who that quote is from, but
I'll have to remember that, because that's inspiration for us all. And I know this is something you made for your son, I believe.
this one I made for my daughter.
Got that wrong.
I made one for my son as well. His was
Oh, that was the circus.
yes. This one, what I started when they were born, I made them each a candle holder for their birthday. And then each year I'd make them a new birthday candle holder. And then when I decided, when they became 9, I thought, okay, I'm going to make this into a Hanukkah for them. So I made the base for all the little candle holders for all their birthdays. So this one I titled Hope. And they're all removable, so you could put them back into a birthday candle cupcakes if you wanted to.
Now, this is something very moving that you made.
Yes, in 2018, October 27th, it was the Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue massacre. And when that occurred, I was in the middle of preparing to do a demo for my students to show them how to make cylinders. And I was going to make 3, and then I ended up making 11 for all the victims that passed away that day. The names are just so familiar, people that, I could have known. And then I mentioned Rabbi Yitz being at our wedding, and he was our officiate, but I guess I mentioned him as the cantor, who I always loved his singing. And he was actually going to be at the synagogue that day. He was just running late. And so, it's a small world, and these kinds of things, the hate crimes, they're just, it really rocked me. I was really upset about it. And so I donated these to the synagogue, and then I believe they gave them to the families of the people
Beautiful.
that died.
So now we're going to begin a series of your Torah pointers. And I want to make sure that we get to hear some of the stories. This is one of your first ones, I believe.
That was also made in grad school in 2001. They're both Tree of Life Torah pointers. That one was a technical exercise. I was working on forging, as I mentioned before with Fred. And so that is 1 rod of silver that I split into, I believe, 9 branches, and then I soldered a few extra more branches on there. So, but for the most part, it's 1 solid piece of metal, and just done with hammering techniques. So I was pushing the boundaries.
And here's these also Torah pointers, but combining your botanical interest as well as your key reference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. These are key to the Tree of Life and the key to the Tree of Knowledge. Mm-hmm. And my interest there in unlocking that story, and the what is truly meant by that origin story of Adam and Eve, and from a kind of a feminist perspective.
And I love this pointer because of the magnifying glass. What is the name? This one has got a name, right?
Octogenarian.
And is that because you need the help to read the words?
That's part of it. Or you're also looking through the words and trying to find the mysteries there. I also initially was going to give this to my husband for his graduation. He's a geriatric social worker specializing in dementia care. And that's been his work for the last 20 years. And then the Jewish Museum in New York wanted to purchase it. So his graduation gift is in the museum. But that was kind of the idea, was for the Octogenarian.
That's a good place for it. So this one is, what have you got? What have you got?
A compass.
That's the compass. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea. Love the idea that you can find your way through
or you can find east till you know where to pray.
Or you can find yourself. And this one has a bee in it and a honeycomb. And what has it got in the end?
That's a citrine, I believe.
And why were you drawn to do the honey? Is that a Rosh Hashanah connection?
Yes, yes. It's the idea of honey and apples for a sweet new year. But as you can see, I did a number of specimen rings in graduate school, and I continued making them for many years, and I still make them occasionally. And it's still that botanical interest and interest in botany and research of botanical names. And some of the rings also have bees and wasps in them. And so that just kind of carried over into this idea. I know Torah pointers aren't traditionally made for a particular holiday, but that was kind of my thought here.
And here we have, I love this one. It's so beautiful, but you're using again the waves that you used before. What is inscribed in it?
That is the blessing for that you recite over lakes and rivers. So yeah, and so it was a commission work, and I love that idea of that scene, and I love the texturing and the hammering, and then I wanted to try my hand at granulation, and then you can see how to spread them out, I put little pebbles with little water bubbles in between
Beautiful.
the layers. And the idea was that it was like water diving into water. All the
Now
bubbles.
this is a beautiful headdress, but I know it's not that. It's nobody's crown, but it is a crown of Torah. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a Keter Torah crown. The Torah has two wooden staves that are that the scroll is rolled on, and those are decorated either with rumonim, which are two separate decorations, or a crown. And this crown I was commissioned to make for our local rabbi, Rabbi Dan, to commemorate his father. He is, I believe, was a seventh generation rabbi, and so there's a lot of. I worked with him to make this meaningful for him. He always remembered the walks after services with his father in the oak forests behind the synagogue in Virginia. Excuse me. And so there's 7 oak trees around the top of the Torah, and there are rocks from the riverbed by the forest that they walked in. There's also 1 rock from Boise in there. There's a lot of numerology and symbolism. You know, there's 18 oak leaves and 18 acorns, and 18 is special for the number chai, which means life. There's 36 rocks, which is double chai for double life, and the Hebrew pierced around both of the bands. One is Eitz Chaim Hi, which is the tree of life. The Torah is a tree of life. I'm sorry. And then the other one is his grandfather, or his father's favorite proverb, or psalm, which was Psalm 90. The works of our hands establish it. And so yeah, there's a lot going on in there. I think there's 18.
I think there's a lot going on in all of your work, Anika. And I know that there's nothing that is by accident. If I were to ask you about something and you'd say, I just liked it, I would be very surprised. Everything has meaning. And I do want to take this moment to say that Anika has a beautiful book that I'm holding up here, and you can see it has the poppy Shabbat candles in it, and that Keter Torah is in here as well. It's a beautiful book. It has a lot of the illustrations that we've looked at today. It's got a lovely hand, and it's beautifully made. And Tamara is going to post in the chat how you could get this book for a lovely gift, and how you can contact and reach out to Anika. And what I want to do now, I'm going to put up this slide. Oh, here it is. There's the book. And it's a gorgeous book, as you can see. And I want to put this slide up that shows some of the objects that Anika, you can buy from her. She is a person who does sell her work. And I'm going to leave this slide up when we take some questions. And I do have some questions for you. Are you ready for questions?
Try my best.
Okay. Here's one question. Oh, how do you put the mezuzah the scroll in the bent towers, the little mezuzahs that are sort of leaning towers. How does the scroll fit in?
I rolled them up very tight and placed them in with tweezers.
All right. Okay. And the cup that your mother-in-law did the calligraphy, what does it say on it? What are the words on it?
Ufros alenu sukat shalom. Spread over us wings of peace. It's one of my father-in-law's favorite prayers.
So here's a personal question for you. What does it feel like to be Jewish in Idaho? I mean, how many are there of you? Is it?
Not too many, but more than you think. We have, I don't know, 350 families, and we actually have been growing up at the congregation Ahavat Beth Yisrael here. I think because it's small, it feels a little bit like growing up in Eugene, Oregon did when we were kids and Jewish. You might be the only Jew in school, but if you're in like one area where a lot of the Jews live, then maybe there's a few Jews in each class. So it feels a little bit like it did growing up, although Idaho's politics are quite a bit different than Oregon's, so it's a bit interesting at times.
I'm sure. Anyways, I want to very much thank you for taking us on a journey through your work and sharing your amazing insights and your incredible research and all the stories that you tell through your work.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Thank you for having me and hosting this. And I also want to thank the American Guild of Judaic Artists for supporting me and the grant and making this happen. And for everybody who was able to come today, it's a real pleasure.